Hello, Jessica. Please come to Harris Restaurant in front of the station immediately. The whole family is waiting here for you. What? Harris Restaurant, that high-end French place? What do you mean the whole family is waiting? Actually, I reserved the place. I have invited even the family members who usually can't attend. The cost will be around $10,000. I will pay with your credit card. Please hurry. With that, my husband Jay hung up the phone. Am I paying $10,000? That's absurd. I just stood there in disbelief. But this wasn't a surprise or a shock. I was just appalled by my husband's foolishness. He truly understands nothing. Despite my having everything under control, my husband has placed himself at the gates of hell, and without hesitation, I'm considering pushing him right to the bottom. With that thought, I left the house. 30 minutes later, I arrived at Harris Restaurant. Jay was waiting alone. He greeted me with a creepy smile that didn't suit the luxurious decor of the restaurant. It seems the relatives are already waiting in another room, but Jay started talking proudly, using that to his advantage. Jessica, as I mentioned earlier, I'll freely use your credit card. It may seem tough, but a wife's money belongs to her husband, after all. It's only natural for a wife to support her husband, right? You have no complaints, right? I was speechless. Such unbelievable foolishness. According to my husband, 20 relatives have gathered, and he has booked a luxurious course costing $500 per person. Harris Restaurant is indeed a high-end French restaurant with a variety of courses, and enjoying them at reasonable prices is one of its charms. Yet my husband deliberately chose the most expensive $500 course. It's as if tormenting his wife is his hobby. Unaware of jeopardizing his own position, Jay seemed quite pleased with himself. In such a ridiculous situation, all I could do was laugh. A wife's wallet belongs to her husband? It's natural for a wife to support her husband? But you know, I stopped that a month ago. What? You stopped being a wife? You can't just quit that easily. Divorce requires formal procedures. You know that, right? Jay, you don't understand anything. If you did, you wouldn't have reserved such an upscale place. How do you plan to pay without money? Are you planning to dine and dash? I would never do something so foolish. I'll say it again. I'll pay with your credit card. If you don't like it, I really will make you quit being my wife, okay? Right after that, I pulled out a document and thrust it in front of my husband. And I revealed just how incompetent he was. I canceled the credit card a month ago. Here's the cancellation certificate. I prepared it because I thought you wouldn't believe me. So, the credit card is unusable. And I'll ask again, with no money, what are you going to do? Are you planning to run away? What? I can't use your credit card? That's impossible. That cancellation certificate, it must be fake. After all, the credit card I took was from your purse. If it really was canceled, there's no reason to keep it in your purse. Hey, so you're not hiding that you took it from my purse? I left the canceled card in there because I thought you might steal it. You were completely fooled. Poor thing. Jessica, what's that attitude? It's unacceptable for a wife to speak to her husband like that. Jay considers himself superior to his wife. It must be unbearable for him to feel outsmarted by someone he deems lower than himself. His irritation peaked, and he raised his voice without concern for those around. Despite talking in a corner of the restaurant, his voice reached the staff, and the place began to buzz. Looking around, Jay suddenly put on a smile and hurriedly tried to manage the situation. Despite gesturing that everything was fine, the whispers around continued. Jay was blushing with embarrassment, but compared to the troubles that awaited him, this was still bearable. Soon after, my in-laws came over to me. It seems Jay's voice had clearly reached the relatives as well. "Jay, what are you doing?" "The relatives are all shocked. You're disturbing other guests too. Look, everyone is watching." "Ahaha. Oh, I just got a bit excited. It's nothing serious, so don't worry." It seemed the in-laws hadn't heard the details of the conversation and looked puzzled, but they said nothing further. Jay was smiling slyly, trying to smooth things over, but he must have been relieved inside that his parents-in-law had arrived. He only shows his true self to me. Especially since he works for the company run by his father, he always pretends to be the ideal husband in front of him. I too made a face of disbelief like the in-laws, but Jay quietly looked at me. "Do not say anything unnecessary. I won't forgive you if you do." I felt this implicit pressure from him. He has always tried to intimidate me and dominate by force. I was scared and I complied, but at that time I couldn't bear it anymore. Jay inviting the relatives was the perfect opportunity to expose his true face in front of everyone. I started the conversation with my in-laws. About settling today's bill, Jay planned to use my credit card. He took the card from my purse and reserved the restaurant without my permission. Exclaimed my in-laws in surprise. That credit card was actually canceled a month ago, but Jay doesn't know that and was planning to use it carelessly. He doesn't have any money, so how does he plan to pay? I explained. "Wait a minute, Jessica. I don't understand. Are you saying Jay stole your card and was planning to settle today's payment?" Jay said he would pay today's expenses. "It will cost about $10,000, but leave it to me," he said. "If what you say is true, was he actually planning to burden you with $10,000? That's hard to believe. Could there be some misunderstanding?" They questioned. My in-laws were visibly shaken. This is the usual response. Even after thinking it over, it's unbelievable, but it's certainly true. Wanting to hide this fact, my husband started speaking brightly while wearing a wry smile. "Jessica is mistaken. I plan to entertain everyone at my own expense. I'll settle the payment in advance, so don't worry." Leaving those words behind, my husband went to the cashier to pay, throwing a creepy smile towards me. It was clear he hadn't accepted that I had canceled the credit card. He still seemed not to believe me even after I showed the cancellation certificate of the card. After a while, my husband returned to us with a smile. My in-laws seemed relieved that the payment was successfully made, but I could sense my husband's tension. He must be panicking inside, thinking, "This is bad." The credit card couldn't be used. That's to be expected, as I had certainly canceled the card. The only choice left for him was to pay the $10,000 himself, but he was incapable of doing that. I also knew what he was hiding. At that moment, I gave him a cold look. "Tell the truth before things get worse," I pressured him. Realizing my intent, his complexion changed. After pondering, he finally revealed the truth. "Sorry, Dad, Mom. I actually couldn't make the payment. Jessica's credit card really was canceled." "Is that the truth? Were you planning to use Jessica's card to pay?" "Absolutely a misunderstanding. It's true that I intended to pay today's expenses with Jessica's credit card, and I had discussed this properly. I was just shocked to find out the card had already been canceled. I apologize, but I'll have to ask to pay for this myself. I will definitely repay." He was weaving lies and truth to escape. It seemed that was the way out he had devised. With astonishing audacity, my husband whispered to me secretly, Hey, why did you cancel the credit card? Are you trying to embarrass me? Why? It's obvious because I didn't want you to use it without permission. The real issue is using the card without consent, not the embarrassment that follows. Despite my husband whispering, I responded boldly. He interrupted me with a surprised look. Quiet. Don't talk about such things here. Keeping a canceled card in your purse only causes confusion. However, it seemed that my in-laws had overheard our conversation, and they looked at my husband sternly. Jay, what are you doing? What do you mean you tried using Jessica's card? Taking it from her purse without permission is unacceptable. Well, there were circumstances. My husband was short on words when his father pressed him. I decided to explain the events in detail instead, intending to expose his true character in front of his parents. For the past year, Jay has hardly returned home all of a sudden. I understood he was busy, as your company is quite large, father-in-law. However, Jay started going out even on holidays and began missing important dates like my birthday and our anniversary. Moreover, he started caring more about his appearance and began using my credit card without my permission. My parents-in-law looked at each other upon hearing this. Both must have had an ominous feeling. I asked Jay that we spend more time together as a couple and that he stop using the credit card without permission. But he argued that it's natural for a wife to cater to her husband and didn't listen. Worse, he threatened divorce and showed me a divorce form he already signed. Divorce, my father-in-law exclaimed in surprise. Have you been making Jessica suffer so much? My mother-in-law raised her voice. My father-in-law stared sternly at his son, realizing that his illusion of his son being an exemplary husband had shattered, though there was hope that my husband would admit his mistakes. No, that's not it. What Jessica is saying is baseless. I need to be mindful of my appearance as I am preparing to take over as president. The meetings I attend on weekends are networking events and seminars, part of my work. What's wrong with using joint funds for work-related purposes? If I stop earning, my wife would suffer too. My husband tried desperately to defend himself. It seems he wanted to claim that he was not at fault. My in-laws remained silent. Perhaps they found some reason in my husband's explanation and could not reproach him. However, I knew the truth he was hiding. No matter his excuses, they were meaningless. Oh, is that so? Then can you still say it's part of your job after looking at this? With that, I decided to present further evidence to my in-laws. From my handbag, I pulled out a document. It listed the dates, store names, and amounts spent. What is this statement? This is a credit card statement. As you can see, it details purchases of luxury items for women. Why would you have something like that? As I showed the document, my husband hurriedly tried to snatch it, but I swiftly brushed off his hand and stared at him, pressing him for answers. Why did you purchase luxury items for women with my credit card? Cosmetics and jewelry aren't necessary for your job, are they? Can you explain this specifically? That was for gifting to the women at work. I was giving them as birthday presents. It's important to be favored by women in business, you know. The expense involved is inevitable, right? His explanation was perplexing, but considering his reputation at work, there might be some truth to it. Hearing it was for birthday presents might seem reasonable. However, this was the first time my husband failed to convince his parents. Whatever the purpose, the fact remains you used Jessica's card without permission. If it really was necessary, you should have discussed it with Jessica. Buying luxury brands because female colleagues asked for them? That doesn't seem credible. I'm sorry. I apologize for using my wife's card. I promise never to do it again. Please forgive me." With that, my husband made an apologetic gesture towards us and his parents. However, my father-in-law's anger did not subside easily, and he sternly admonished my husband, "Just because you're married doesn't mean you can use a credit card without permission. Moreover, because the amount is substantial, make sure to reimburse Jessica for the money spent." "All right, I'll refund the money." My husband appeared disheartened and seemed reflective as he looked down, but I was still not convinced. Does he think I don't know he's still hiding something? This was just the beginning of the real test. My husband and I, along with his parents, headed to the room where the other relatives were waiting. There, I pulled out my smartphone from my bag and pressed the play button. The sudden playback surprised my husband, and he stared at me in disbelief, his face quickly turning pale. The audio was a conversation between a man and a woman, where my husband was insulting me, and the woman was saying, "Hurry up and divorce your wife." The surrounding family members were shocked by this revelation. "Jay, who is this woman?" I asked. My husband frantically searched for an excuse. During this, his parents glared at him with expressions filled with anger. The relatives were also appalled by the scene. My husband faced another crisis immediately after the credit card issue, without a moment to catch his breath. "There's no hiding it anymore. You were having an affair, weren't you?" I asserted. At this, my husband began to sweat and shouted something in response. "That's not true. I'm not having an affair. It was wrong of me to speak ill of you. But she's just a friend, and we were just hanging out. By the way, when did you prepare this? Eavesdropping is illegal." Although he confirmed that he had insulted me, he continued to deny the affair. Moreover, he tried to shift the focus of the conversation and point the blame at me. However, I was not backing down. I explained the facts to him so that he couldn't escape them. "Jay, I've been watching you for a long time. The credit card history made the affair obvious. That's why, while you pretended to go to work, I installed a listening device in your car." "A listening device in the car? That's ridiculous. As I said earlier, eavesdropping is illegal. Do you understand that? If it's to catch evidence of infidelity, it's not illegal, as long as it's not for stalking or similar behavior." This strong stance showed that I was prepared to do whatever necessary to uncover the truth, prioritizing my well-being and seeking justice in our troubled relationship. My husband fell silent, fully aware that he was struggling to justify himself. However, he couldn't bring himself to admit it and appealed to his parents and relatives. "Everyone, please don't believe what she's saying. She's trying to trap me. I haven't been unfaithful. What a troublesome person." While sighing, I threw a document at my husband in front of the relatives. "What is this? What do you think?" "It's a demand for compensation." At that, my husband's complexion changed rapidly. "This document is a demand for compensation I sent to my husband's mistress. It was confirmed through investigation. You were having an affair with a woman named Mary. So I visited Mary and demanded compensation from her before you. You met Mary directly and demanded compensation? What were you thinking?" My husband was so shocked that he was rendered speechless. However, he is the one being excessive. It's unreasonable for him to blame me while overlooking his own mistakes. Surprised, aren't you? But she told me everything. She didn't hide your wrongdoings. You were buying luxury items for her with my credit card, weren't you? The excuse about gifts for female employees was obviously a lie. It was all used for her, in fact. Mary told you everything. If the evidence is complete, it's undeniable. Mary also honestly admitted to the affair and agreed to pay compensation because of my card. That's why I brought this compensation claim. My husband looked up at the sky, his face filled with despair. I waved the compensation claim lightly and displayed it in front of my husband. Unable to hide his irritation, my husband raised his voice. "Damn, to think you planned all this without me noticing. Truly a cunning wife." "Eh, wife? I was your wife, but that's a thing of the past. I told you a month ago that I quit. Didn't you hear? In fact, the divorce papers have already been submitted. I'm just an acquaintance now." "Did you really submit the divorce papers? Why are you surprised?" "I simply submitted the divorce papers you waved in my face to trouble me. Everything's done through the proper procedures. Any complaints? But you shouldn't just file for divorce on your own. Divorcing without discussion is unreasonable." "It might be unreasonable, but the fact that you used my credit card without permission doesn't change. That's why I filed the divorce papers on my own. Now this matter is settled." My husband was speechless and astonished. It was clear he hadn't anticipated my actions. My in-laws and other relatives watching this exchange seemed to realize that my story was true. Using Jessica's credit card without permission and having an affair. To think we believed you two were happily married and you were committing such betrayals. The entire family grimaced with anger and sternly reprimanded my husband. My father-in-law declared resolutely to my husband, "This marks the end of our relationship as parent and child. Additionally, you are fired from the company." "Fired? Just for an affair? This is too harsh. Think about it calmly." At that moment, a sharp snap sound echoed. It came from my mother-in-law. She had slapped my husband's cheek hard. Tears were brimming in her eyes. Sadness, pity, and disappointment were intermingling in her gaze. "Just an affair? You're the one who's wrong, Jay. You planned to hurt Jessica and just run away." Silenced by his mother's angry voice, my husband said nothing. At that moment, all eyes coldly blamed my husband. Merely an affair, he had said, revealing his irresponsibility. "My wife's money is mine." A wife should devote herself to her husband, he had loudly proclaimed. Such selfish attitudes were unforgivable. My husband remained silent for a while, but his stubbornness was unyielding. He slowly raised his head and declared resolutely, "It doesn't matter what happens. Be it divorce or being fired, I'm going to be with Mary. What did you say?" Surprisingly, my husband defiantly revealed his plans to marry another woman immediately after our divorce. Then, he confidently declared, "I am skilled enough to work at any company without a problem. My father's company is worthless. As long as I have Mary, that's all I need. I truly love her. Marrying her is all I need." My in-laws were stunned by his words. Despite being coerced into a divorce, ostracized by his family, and losing his job, my husband still maintained a defiant stance. However, his attitude was reaching its limit. "You might not know this, but Mary has been dating several other men as well." "That's a lie. Mary loves only me. You're just jealous and making this up." "But this is the truth. She has relationships with multiple men, and you were not the most important to her." "Not the most important." "Yes, you were not that significant to her. In fact, she paid the compensation to me quickly to avoid problems." "I can't believe it. I didn't think Mary was that kind of woman." The idea that Mary had feelings for you was just a delusion. You were just being used. By the way, the compensation she paid me was actually funded by another man she was seeing. That's a lie, a lie. There's no way Mary would deceive me. We are going to get married. Nothing you do can stop us. It seems my husband still couldn't accept reality. So I calmly confronted him with the truth. It's about time you understand that you've been abandoned. Haven't you been unable to contact Mary recently? Neither calls nor messages are going through, right? Now that you mention it. My husband faltered. It seems he could understand that fact. In short, you are no longer needed. You've been blocked. I am no longer needed. Yes, exactly. Have you understood now? There is nothing left for you. It is a fitting end for someone who has deceived others as you have. After telling him this, he collapsed to his knees and bowed his head right there. Please, Jessica. I am truly sorry. Please forgive me. It seemed that my husband had realized his situation. Please reconsider the divorce. Please rescind the firing, he pleaded repeatedly, bowing to me and my in-laws. However, everyone had moved away from his side. It's too late for apologies now. I will firmly demand the property division and the money you squandered using my credit card. A person like you is just a nuisance to any organization. If you think you can work somewhere else, go ahead and try. It will prove to be worthless anyway. Please, don't leave me like this. I am reflecting on my actions. Can I have just one more chance? With tears in his voice, my husband continued to appeal to his father while keeping his head bowed. However, my former father-in-law, having given up on his son, ignored him and hurried out of the restaurant. His wife followed him. The relatives also proceeded with their preparations to go home, showing no further interest in my husband. Well, I'll settle the payment then. What? You're paying the $10,000. Of course, I will bill it later. I smiled sweetly. So, he muttered as he collapsed onto his knees. Today, due to my retaliation, it became the most painful day for him. However, this story is not yet over. His ordeal will continue. After the incident, I returned to my parents' house, but I have been receiving numerous missed calls for the past few days. All of them were from my ex-husband, Jay. The phone is still ringing incessantly, and I am aware of the reason why. I had been deliberately ignoring him, but I decided to answer the phone this time to deliver the final blow. Jessica, you finally answered. Please, help me out. I'm truly in trouble. Sounds like a tough situation. What happened? Are you trying to escape debt collectors? What? How did you know that? Did someone tell you? No, I found out through my own research. Jay, you have accumulated a substantial amount of debt, haven't you? Not only have you been giving money to your mistress, but I heard you've also been paying your coworkers to do your job. Despite their repeated refusals, you forced them to comply by exploiting your position as the boss's son, using dirty tactics to keep up appearances at the company and enjoying affairs in your free time, taking on debt just to have your way. Such foolish actions. On the day when the family gathered at that fancy restaurant, when it was discovered that the credit card had been canceled, the only option for Jay was to pay the $10,000 himself. But I knew it was impossible for him to do so. I had already investigated and knew about his significant debt. Jay, this is all the result of your own doing. But you're capable, aren't you? You can surely excel elsewhere. Leaving your father's company shouldn't be a problem, right? Well. The truth is, I haven't found another job yet. All the interviews have been unsuccessful, and I'm being chased for my debts, which has taken a toll on me mentally. Haha, that's exactly why I asked. What can be expected from someone who pushed his work onto others to boost his own performance? Even if you find another job, it won't last. Don't you understand that? Jay couldn't respond. My accusations hit the mark. Unless he reflects on his actions and changes his ways, he'll continue making the same mistakes forever. If things continue this way, he will face nothing but agony, even without my intervention. Jessica, I truly regret everything. I should have cherished you more. I should have worked sincerely at my father's company, but I neglected that. I'm sincerely reflecting, so won't you consider starting anew with me? I must say it's impossible to try again. I believe people can change, but there are unforgivable actions. You deceived not only me but also many others who trusted you. You need to pay the price for that. Of course, you will also fully repay the property division and the money you misused. Escaping is absolutely not an option. After confirming that Jay had fallen silent again, I calmly ended the call. A few days later, I had the opportunity to hear more about Jay's recent situation from my former in-laws. As expected, he hadn't found a stable job to transition to and ended up seeking support from his family. I need help because we're family. Is it okay for our son to end up like this? He was desperately pleading for support with such words. He ignored his family and deceived his relatives, only to ask for help when he himself was in trouble. How can he think such self-centered behavior is acceptable? His thinking has always been self-centered, focused only on himself. The reason Jay has lived so comfortably up to now is because of the help and support from those around him, but I have never once heard a word of gratitude from him. If I had seen his true nature before getting married, I would have never married him. I deeply regret having endured everything alone without consulting anyone. Had I consulted my in-laws or other relatives sooner, perhaps a completely different future would have awaited me. From now on, I will face myself more honestly, aiming to become stronger and more resolute. It's time to say goodbye to the weaker version of myself and step forward with a firm resolution into a new beginning. Really? Then, which would you prefer, divorce or caregiving? The one who presented me with this extreme choice was my husband, in the 15th year of our marriage. For many years, he has despised and exploited me. At 43 years old, with dim prospects for remarriage, he probably doesn't expect me to choose divorce. He is forcing this cruel choice upon me, fully aware of that fact. I sighed quietly so that my husband couldn't hear. Any affection I once had for my husband had already vanished from my heart. And he still doesn't know the fact that I would not be troubled by anything even if we divorced. While watching my husband's unpleasant smirk, I took a deep breath. Then, to release the long-accumulated resentment, I stared back at him intently. My name is Joyce Hill. I turned 43 this spring. My marriage to Solomon began from a romance, and 15 years have passed. Our meeting started when Solomon approached me at the bar I frequented. This bar is so hidden, I didn't expect to find someone as young and charming as you here. Would you like to drink together? Initially, I saw him as a frivolous person, but as we talked more, I began to see his charm. Solomon listened to me attentively and always laughed joyfully. I was drawn to his smile, and eventually, we started dating. 2 years later, we decided to get married. Is it true that he has debts? You should avoid marrying such a person. most of the hardships will fall on you. It's not just about the debt, but I feel like he's hiding something. I can't entrust my precious daughter to someone like that." After I introduced Solomon to my parents, they expressed their opposition to our marriage. Solomon had lost his father when he was young and struggled financially during his college days. He explained that he had incurred debts to cover tuition and living expenses, but my parents were skeptical of his story. Could he be falsifying something? "Enough. Even if you both don't approve, I'm going to marry Solomon." I married Solomon despite my parents' objections. As a result, this issue caused my relationship with my parents to become distant. More precisely, I was the one who distanced myself from them. 15 years have passed since I married Solomon. I am now 43 years old, but we have never had children. Solomon treats me not as a wife, but as someone who does household chores. Initially, we were a loving couple. We'll have kids someday. We used to say as we both led busy lives. However, just a year after our marriage, the company I was working for went bankrupt. At that time, Zelda, my mother-in-law, who was living separately, made this suggestion while I was busy looking for a new job. "Why don't you just stay at home? That way you'll have kids in no time. Show me my grandchildren soon." 6 months into our marriage, my mother-in-law had already started pressing us for children. She saw the bankruptcy of my company as a perfect opportunity for me to stop job hunting. Honestly, it's difficult to make ends meet on Solomon's income alone. He is still paying off his college debts, and the living expenses he can provide me are limited. Ignoring Zelda's words, I managed to find a new job, but this seemed to have backfired. After that, my mother-in-law started throwing harsh words at me. "I want to see my grandchildren soon, but Joyce doesn't understand my wishes at all." Oh, I should have opposed the marriage. Solomon could have found someone much better suited for him. She calmly stated these words in front of me, and her sarcasm became even more severe. What a useless daughter-in-law. Can't you even do this? I'm sorry. Every weekend, my mother-in-law calls me over to handle a massive amount of household chores. Shopping, cleaning, cooking, laundry, the domestic tasks are all left to me. I comply with her demands to help her, but she never thanks me. Instead, she only complains about my household skills. "When you cook, the food tastes awful. Even store-bought dishes would be better," she says. When I buy prepared dishes, she complains. That's cutting corners or the flavor is too strong. However, I can't complain directly to Solomon's mother, so I just keep enduring it. Worse, Solomon has gradually come under his mother's influence and has started looking down on me. It can't be helped that your career was reset by changing jobs, but with such a low salary, it's impossible to make a living, right? You understand that, don't you? I can't afford to support you alone, so I want you to earn at least $30,000 a year. That's the standard. Since it was right after I changed jobs, my income was very low. Solomon was dissatisfied with this and demanded that I earn more, and in addition, he pressed me to perfectly handle the household chores and deal with my mother-in-law. After returning home, he does no housework at all, and on weekends he goes out and has fun. Solomon gives me only a few $100s for living expenses, and he spends the rest on his hobbies and pleasures. The debts he had from his student days were, at some point, fully paid off. It later became clear that these debts were due to a gambling addiction, and his story of being a struggling student was a lie. After we got married, by me paying most of the living expenses, he managed to gain financial leeway and pay off his debts. However, Even after repaying his debts, the amount of living expenses he provided me remained small. In this situation, I continued to live frugally, but Solomon blamed me, saying, "We're living like this because you don't earn more." Due to this stressful lifestyle, one day, I suddenly collapsed at work. The doctor diagnosed it as being due to overwork. When Solomon and his mother visited the hospital, they were angry that I collapsed from overwork. "You're too weak to collapse from something like this. Can you really live like this?" they criticized me. What Solomon is saying is right. Really, it's pathetic to collapse from overwork. What if people think we're pushing you too hard? It would be embarrassing for us, she added. Despite their lack of concern for me, I had no energy left to argue with them as my fatigue had accumulated. Gradually, their harsh treatment became a routine part of my days. The reason I endure the harsh treatment from Solomon and his mother is because I decided to marry him, ignoring my parents' objections. I've been pushing myself because I took a strong stance against my parents, and I can't just give up because of a few difficulties. While enduring this, I suddenly realized that 15 years had passed since my marriage. During this time, Solomon and his mother's treatment of me has never improved. I've always been treated like their servant. I no longer have the energy to fight back. However, recently her health has worsened, and I've been called more frequently to take care of her. "Mother-in-law, you should go to the hospital." I've been doing the household chores at her house every week, but about a month ago, I noticed that her complexion was bad. Today, she looked particularly unwell, giving out orders in a harsh tone while sitting in her chair. Having been treated like a servant for years, I'm used to it, but I can't overlook someone who looks sick right in front of me. Still, she seems to dislike my concern. Stop playing doctor. I'll decide about my own health. But, quiet. While shouting, she threw a cup from the table in my direction. However, lacking strength, the cup didn't reach me and fell at her feet instead. "What are you doing?" "Pick up that cup and clean it up." Seemingly wanting to get away from me quickly, she staggered up from her chair and went into the next room. I silently wiped up the contents of the cup that had fallen to the floor. Well, she's so energetic, she must be fine. I had been discussing her health with Solomon, but he showed little interest. "Taking care of my mother is your job, isn't it?" "There's not much I can do if you tell me about it." Normally I say nothing, but this time I wanted to retort, "But she's your mother, isn't she?" But retorting wouldn't change the situation. If anything, it would just lead to Solomon complaining more. Lately, Solomon's return home has been getting later. I haven't had the chance to discuss her condition, and the days just pass by. And then one day, everything changed. What? My mother-in-law was rushed to the emergency room. I received a call from the hospital while I was at the office. They tried calling Solomon, but he didn't answer, so the call eventually came to me. I hurriedly wrapped up my work and headed to the hospital. She had collapsed while shopping at a local deli. According to the doctor, although her life was not in danger, she would need support for daily activities after being discharged. Can it be? Until now, she had lived separately from us, and that distance was what made my difficult life somewhat bearable. But if we were to live together, I had not been disturbed by her harassment over the past 15 years, but now I was filled with anxiety. If I were to live with her, would I be able to maintain my mental health? After hearing the situation at the hospital, I left her in the doctor's care and returned home. Solomon hadn't come to the hospital, he was waiting at home. When I explained what had happened, he became angry. "Why didn't you take her to the hospital sooner? It's your fault that my mother ended up in this condition." I had repeatedly urged her to go to the hospital, but she wouldn't listen to me. I had consulted Solomon about it, but he found it too bothersome and did nothing. Really, is this my fault? As I silently pondered, Solomon sighed heavily. Then, he made an unbelievable suggestion. Now that things have come to this, there's no choice but to have my mother live here. We'll sell her house and land. Of course, you will take on the caregiving. Using caregiving services would be too expensive, so I'm leaving all of her care to you. What? But then I won't be able to continue working. What are you talking about? It's only natural that you continue with your job and the housework as before. Saying that you can't do your job or housework because of caregiving is just an excuse. Faced with Solomon's unreasonable remarks, I was simply stunned. Does he really think I can handle caregiving, work, and household chores all by myself? It's impossible. At these words that slipped out unexpectedly, Solomon reacted, If we're going to take care of your mother here, we must share the responsibilities of household and caregiving. It's impossible for me to do everything alone. Solomon looked surprised at my rebuttal. Having spent the past 15 years mostly without defiance, not only he but also I was surprised by my own reaction. However, those spontaneous words highlighted how unrealistic his demands were. Solomon frowned and retorted, "Is that so? Then, which would you prefer, divorce or caregiving?" Choose either. I don't care." While saying this, Solomon gave an unpleasant smirk, imposing a tremendous choice on me. "You're not on good terms with your parents, and if we divorce, who will you rely on? It'll be difficult for a woman alone to live decently. With such a low salary, if you leave me, that's the end. Without me, could you even survive?" Thus, Solomon confidently indicated that divorce was not an option for me. Witnessing him looking down on me with such arrogance, it felt like something inside me broke. "All right then, I choose divorce. I'm moving out today. Why don't you ask your 23-year-old lover to take care of her?" "What?" Surprised by my unexpected response, Solomon let out a jesting tone I had never heard before. His voice sounded so pitiful that I almost laughed, but I thought better of it, as laughing would not help the situation progress. Holding back my laughter, I pulled out something I had been hiding in my bag for a long time. "Here, take this." While puzzled, Solomon took the bulging brown envelope I offered him. As he checked the contents of the envelope, his face gradually turned pale. "What is this?" As Solomon's voice trembled, I answered calmly, "It's evidence of your affair with your 23-year-old lover." The envelope contained numerous photographs. In the photos, Solomon was seen intimately linking arms with a young woman. Solomon's return home had started to get later 6 months ago. At that time, I began to suspect his dishonest actions, but I had yet to obtain concrete evidence. However, his consistently cheerful demeanor when he came home every day intuitively told me something was off. So I hired a detective and discovered that he was indeed having an affair. His affair partner was a 23-year-old stripper. He first visited the cabaret club as part of a business association. Solomon, inherently frivolous, had dated several women before our marriage, but it seemed that these women issues had resolved after he shifted his interests elsewhere post-marriage. However, one day, invited to a strip club by a business contact, he met a woman who perfectly matched his ideals and fell for her instantly. Since then, he has been pouring his salary into that strip club, eventually forming an intimate relationship with the stripper. Your affair partner? She's cute and young, but do you think she can take care of your mother? Your mother likes to give orders, and she will be even more demanding after she's discharged." Pointing to the woman in the photos, I confronted Solomon. "No, this is a misunderstanding. It was just a bit of fun, not an affair." He stammered, his previous confidence vanished, and he began to offer a feeble excuse. "Oh, just a bit of fun, huh?" "Yes, that's right. I didn't intend to do anything serious." Cutting off his excuses, I sighed heavily and stopped the conversation. Then, I pulled out my smartphone and played an audio file. "I'll divorce my wife soon, and then I'll marry you right after. I'll protect you for the rest of your life." Hearing Solomon's sweet voice from the smartphone, I grimaced with discomfort. Meanwhile, Solomon, pale-faced, stared at me, demanding to know why I had such a thing. "This is just a part of the evidence collected by the detective agency. There are loads of your call records with her. And whether or not you were serious doesn't matter. Having an affair with someone else while married to me is clearly infidelity." While saying that, I selected a photo from the stack of evidence and showed it to Solomon. In the photo, they were captured entering a hotel, arms linked intimately. "Do you want to see more? I can show you plenty of other evidence. Are you still planning to make excuses?" Solomon shuddered at my challenging question. He probably realized that he could no longer talk his way out of this. Changing tactics, he began to accuse me. "Hey, did you use my money to hire a detective? Using my hard-earned money for such wasteful spending? Give me back my money." Caught off guard by this unexpected attack, I was momentarily at a loss for words. Solomon seized this opportunity to further his verbal assault. "Do you know how much it costs to hire a detective? Using my money for such a ridiculous investigation? You're the worst wife. Well, if you return the money with interest, I might forgive you this time." Seeing Solomon twist the situation for his own benefit, I was utterly astounded and asked, "When did you become so petty?" Struggling to maintain my composure, I calmly retorted to Solomon, "I used my own savings for the detective. I haven't touched your money at all, so no worries there." "That can't be true. There's no way you have that much money to hire a detective. Or, did you not know that I was recently promoted to department manager? I'm earning quite a sum now." Solomon was visibly shocked by this unexpected revelation. After graduating from college, the company where I had worked for a long time went bankrupt due to the economic downturn. In my next job, I started from scratch as a basic sales clerk, despite leveraging my experience. I was initially placed in a sales administration role, but there was a system in place that promised additional bonuses for success, not just a base salary. Content at first with the administrative position, I faced Solomon's complaints of earn more and directly requested my boss for a transfer to sales. The sales role was challenging, but I embraced the challenge and became the first person to transition from an administrative to a sales role at the company. At the time, the company was seriously short-staffed in sales, and help was desperately needed. After handing over the sales admin tasks to a newly joined female employee, I started focusing entirely on sales. The sales job was indeed tough, but it turned out to be surprisingly suitable for me. I achieved results that matched those of my male colleagues and gradually earned recognition, leading to multiple promotions. Now, I hold the position of department manager. While many women interrupt their careers for childbirth and childcare, I was able to continue working because Solomon and I didn't have children. This allowed me to build and advance my career. Had we had children, my career might have been interrupted, and divorcing Solomon could have been more complicated. Why didn't you tell me something so important? I tried to tell you. But whenever I tried to talk, you hardly listened, did you? When I decided to transition from sales administration to a sales position, I attempted to share this with Solomon. However, he said, "Work talk? Spare me. I don't want to hear about it when I come home. I'm tired." And with that, he never listened to the end of my story. With each promotion, I tried again to tell Solomon, but he never seemed interested in listening. Despite his constant demands for me to earn more, he showed no real interest in what kind of work I was doing or how much I was actually earning. It was last winter when I saw the amount of the bonus I received from the company, and a thought struck me. If I'm handling such a large amount of money, I could live comfortably on my own. I had never thought that way before, but at that moment, it just came to me naturally. Perhaps I had been harboring some dissatisfaction with my situation for a long time. I had married Solomon despite strong opposition from my parents, telling myself that I must overcome any difficulties to stay with him. However, even with such determination, there are limits to what one can endure. After 15 years of marriage, I finally reached that limit. Following this realization, I decided to divorce and hired a detective for that purpose. While I had suspected Solomon's dishonest behavior, I had not yet taken any concrete steps. Until now, I had not considered divorce as an option, convincing myself that I should stay with Solomon no matter how hard it was. However, the moment I decided to divorce, I took action. I finally obtained proof of the affair, and now I am confronting Solomon. Solomon has not treated me as an equal. To him, I was merely a convenient tool, routinely belittled and treated like a servant. Before our marriage, he was kind and listened to me. However, at some point, he changed into this cold person. Perhaps I just hadn't noticed before, but maybe Solomon was always like this. Who would want to stay with such a person? Normally, it's impossible. That's why I chose divorce. I definitely do not want to take care of a mother-in-law who has never valued me from the start. Even if offered money, I would refuse. After her collapse, my mother-in-law's body became frail, but her mind remained sharp. If I were to care for her at home after her discharge, it's certain she would treat me more like a servant than before. I would consider caregiving if she respected and appreciated me, but expecting such an attitude from her is unrealistic. When Solomon confidently forced me to choose between caregiving and divorce, my mind was already made up. I should tell you, I earn more than you do. What? Despite your lack of substantial contributions to our living expenses, the fact you never questioned our lifestyle shows how oblivious you are. The reason you could eat every day is because I was earning. It seems you still don't understand, but you're the one who would be in trouble if we divorced. Solomon, who has always looked down on me, is clearly upset to learn that I earn more. His face turns red, his lips press tightly together, and he trembles with anger as he glares at me. As I watch him in disbelief, he blurts out something unexpected. "Fine, I get it. I want a divorce from such an arrogant woman like you. In exchange, give me half of your savings. There's such a thing as division of property." His foolishness makes me look up to the sky in frustration. But I quickly return my gaze to him and deliver a further blow with a cold voice. "If you're going to claim division of property, you'll need to speak to my lawyer." "What? A lawyer? Are you surprised? I've already contracted a lawyer to handle the division of assets." If Solomon had said he would take care of his mother's caregiving himself, I would have reconsidered the divorce and put the lawyer on hold. Originally, I had intended to overlook Solomon's infidelity and get through this tough period together. I hadn't expected him to make such a proposal, but it ended up this way. Solomon clearly became flustered the moment he heard the word lawyer. A lawyer, is that? Isn't this something we can handle ourselves? There's no need to go that far. You've never listened to me properly and have ignored me all along. That's why I think it's impossible for us to resolve this alone. Moreover, I want you to take responsibility for everything that's happened, and involving a professional is the best way to ensure that. Solomon looked around anxiously with a pale face. Did you really think you did nothing wrong? At that, Solomon's face contorted even more. He had demeaned and treated me like a servant, but he seemingly never anticipated being retaliated against in such a manner. His selfish actions made me regret marrying him and resent my own choices. Then, I'll start packing. You figure out the rest. As I said this and began to leave, Solomon suddenly reached out and grabbed the hem of my clothes. Wait. Let go. I don't have any money. I frowned at Solomon's sudden confession. I got obsessed with the stripper and bought her lots of designer goods to get her attention. Because of that, my savings are almost gone. That's why I don't have any money to give you. Recently, I've even been borrowing a bit from my mother's pension. Unbelievable. You've been using your own mother's pension. This was the first I'd heard of it, but it seemed like something Solomon would do. A thought suddenly struck me. You never talked about living together before, but as soon as your mother got sick, you suggested it. Not really for her sake, but for your own benefit, right? Are you trying to sell her house and land to get the money? At my words, Solomon awkwardly diverted his gaze. The nausea stirred within me knowing my husband could act so calculatingly. You're truly despicable. To do such things for your own gain. I've been treated horribly by your mother, but I do feel sorry for her having such a son. However, while I might feel a hint of sympathy, I'm not about to forgive all her past actions. I shook off Solomon's hand and declared coldly, it doesn't matter that your savings are depleted. If necessary, I'll have your wages garnished to cover the costs. I have a divorce lawyer who's experienced in these matters. Wait, please reconsider, I'm begging you. It's impossible. No matter how firmly I refused, Solomon showed no signs of giving up easily. He knelt down as if atoning for a grave sin, desperately begging for forgiveness. I'm truly sorry. From now on, I'll change and start over. I'll help with my mother's care, of course, and I'll actively assist with the household chores. And I'll never cheat again. If you divorce me, my life has no future, he pleaded. It seemed he finally understood that his daily life couldn't function without me. But it was too late. How can I believe your words now after years of betrayal? You are incredibly naive and detached from reality. I am determined to go through with this divorce by any means necessary, I stated resolutely. No way, Solomon exclaimed in shock. What you are about to face is the natural consequence of your continuous disregard for me. Just quietly accept it. Be prepared, I told him. A look of complete despair crossed Solomon's face, and he collapsed weakly to the floor. Following that, we formally proceeded with the divorce and successfully settled the division of assets with the help of a lawyer. Solomon decided to take care of his mother and sold the house and land she owned. He then used the proceeds from the sale to pay the alimony. After the divorce, Solomon, now left only with the stripper he had been involved with, proposed marriage to her. My wife has left me, and I've lost everything. You're all I have left. Help me, marry me, and take care of my mother. However, the stripper firmly rejected his proposal. She was only using Solomon's emotions for her business, confused by genuine affection, and sternly rejected him, insisting he never come to the club again. When Solomon proposed marriage to the young stripper, intending for her to take care of his mother, it was an unbearable request for her. Solomon, once charming, seemed to have lost his ability to understand women over time. 15 years had passed, and the man he once was no longer existed. Ultimately, his relationship with the stripper he met at the strip club ended with him being banned from the establishment. All the money and time he had invested there vanished without yielding anything. I did not demand an apology from the stripper. When I found out his affair partner worked at the strip club, I intuitively understood it was part of her professional behavior. I am grateful to her for cooperating to smooth the divorce process. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was initially pleased to hear about our divorce but found reality far from her expectations after being discharged from the hospital. She suffers under Solomon's inadequate care and repeatedly pleads for my return. "Why did you divorce Joyce? You are the reason I am suffering so much." She lashes out at her son. She seems utterly unaware that she was part of the reason for our divorce. If she had been more understanding, she might not have left Solomon alone, and perhaps we would not have divorced. However, my mother-in-law is very self-centered, much like Solomon. Financially unable to afford caregiving services, Solomon finds himself in a dire situation regarding his mother's care. Thinking of this as a long-deserved punishment for their treatment of me, I sometimes feel that this is still relatively mild. Their future seems wrapped in misfortune and darkness. Whatever future awaits them, I find myself detached from any particular feelings about it. It's their just dessert, I think, without much emotion. After the divorce, I visited my parents' home to apologize sincerely for my past actions. I was prepared for potential estrangement, but contrary to my expectations, my parents warmly welcomed me back. "If you are happy, then we are satisfied," my parents told me. "Yes, you are always our beloved daughter. Your happiness is the most important thing to us." My mother added, "Mom, Dad, thank you so much." I expressed my deep gratitude. In fact, my parents had forgiven me from the beginning, and I am just grateful for their tolerance. Currently, I have rented a new apartment near my parents' home and have started a new chapter. Although my job remains busy as before, not having to worry about Solomon or Zelda has significantly eased my life. In the future, even if I have the opportunity to remarry, I plan to be more cautious when choosing a partner. But for now, I think it might be quite nice to spend some time alone. I am considering enjoying this independent life. I cherish these peaceful days.